started with a knock on the door. Just one knock. Soft, almost polite. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was past midnight, and the rain outside was coming down hard, like the sky was angry. I hesitated, but the knock came again, louder this time, insistent.
Who is it?
No answer, just the sound of the rain hitting the roof. I walked to the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I told myself it was probably the wind, or maybe a branch hitting the house. But deep down, I knew better. Something was out there.
Hello, anyone there?
I opened the door, just a crack. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. And then I saw him, standing in the shadows, just beyond the porch light. A man. Tall, thin, wearing a dark coat that clung to his frame like it was part of him. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Red. Glowing red. Like two burning coals in the night.
What do you want?
He didn't answer. He just stared at me, those red eyes piercing through the darkness. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection from the rain. But when I looked out the window, he was gone. The next morning I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a bad dream maybe. But then I found the footprints, muddy, leading from the porch to the edge of the woods, and they weren't human. They were too long, too narrow, with claw-like marks at the tips.
This can't be real. This can't be happening.
I spent the day trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked out the window, I expected to see those red eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing. Just the empty yard and the dark line of trees beyond. That night the knock came again. Louder this time, more urgent. I didn't answer. I sat on the couch, my eyes glued to the door, waiting for it to burst open. But it didn't. Instead, I heard a voice. Low, raspy, like it hadn't been used in years.
Let me in.
My blood turned to ice. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice came again, louder, more demanding.
Let me in.
I grabbed my phone and called the police. They said they'd send someone, but it would take time. I hung up and sat there, listening to the silence. And then I heard it. A scratching sound, like nails dragging across the door. Slow, deliberate. I could feel my heart beating in my throat.
Go away. Leave me alone.
The scratching stopped. For a moment there was nothing, and then the door creaked open, just an inch. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't even touched it. But there it was, swinging open, revealing the darkness outside. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy flashlight, and held it like a weapon. The door opened wider and I saw him again, the red-eyed man. He stepped inside, his movements slow, almost graceful. His coat dripped water onto the floor, but his eyes, those eyes, never left mine.
You shouldn't have locked the door.
I swung the flashlight at him, but he caught it with one hand, his grip like iron. He pulled it from me and tossed it aside like it was nothing. I backed away, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move.
You've been chosen.
Chosen? What did that mean? I didn't have time to ask. He reached out, his hand cold as ice, and touched my forehead. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the woods. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet, the air thick with the smell of decay. I didn't know how I got there. I didn't even know where there was. But I knew one thing, I wasn't alone. I could hear them before I saw them, whispers, coming from all around me, soft, almost like the wind, but I could make out the words.
He's here.
He's the one.
I turned, trying to find the source of the voices, but the trees were too thick, the shadows too deep. And then I saw them, figures moving between the trees. pale, almost translucent, their eyes glowing the same red as the man's. They were watching me, their faces twisted into something between a smile and a snarl.
What do you want from me?
They didn't answer. They just kept whispering, their voices growing louder, more insistent. I started to run, my feet slipping in the mud, but no matter how fast I went, they were always there, just out of reach. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. My lungs were burning, my legs aching, but I couldn't stop. Not until I saw the light. A single flickering light in the distance. A house. My house. I burst through the door, slamming it shut behind me. I locked it, then pushed a chair against it for good measure. My heart was racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But I was safe. I was home, or so I thought. The whispers started again, this time coming from inside the house. I turned, my eyes scanning the room, but there was no one there. Just the shadows stretching and twisting in the dim light.
You can't escape.
You belong to us now.
I covered my ears, but the voices were in my head, echoing, growing louder and louder until I thought my skull would split open. And then I saw him, the red-minded man, standing in the corner of the room, his eyes burning like fire.
You've been chosen.
I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the floor. The man stepped closer, his hand reaching out again, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in the woods. The whispers were gone, the figures nowhere to be seen. But I knew they were still there, watching, waiting. And I knew I couldn't escape. Not this time. The red-eyed man had chosen me, and now I belonged to them.